Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox, and a rather sort of unusual thing today. The story is no different from my usual stuff, but the source of the story is. It came from one of you good people, one of my regular viewers, my loyal band. And it was sent to me and suggested that this would make a good story, and I thought, having read it, yes, it would. So, yes, thank you to the person who supplied this. They know who they are. Very grateful for that. So, and I would ask if anyone's watching this who's a regular viewer but not subscribed, do hit that subscribe button, and do please, all of you, feel free contacting us, giving the an idea for a story. We will certainly look at it, and we're very grateful for that. And if it's in something that interests you, we'll follow it up. We have no issue at all. So, getting into it. What this is about is that age-old perennial problem that absolutely terrifies politicians. And the question is, what is a woman? We all know that they absolutely run away from every time that's asked. Because although 99.99% of us know what a woman is, and indeed they know what a woman is, they dare not define it how we would define it. Because that tiny band, that tiny 0.1%, would yell and scream and call them ists and phobes. And they're scared of that, although I don't know why. You shouldn't be enabling these people in their delusions, because simply wishing for something doesn't make it so. You know this when you're an adult. But this is all about the definition of a woman, and it is to do with two pieces of legislation, the 2010 2010 Equality Act and the 2022 Gender Recognition Act going through Scotland. It only affects Scotland. And it's all to do with the definition of a woman. The Gender Recognition Act saying that women include men who identify as women, whereas the Equality Act has actual sex as a protected characteristic. Gender is also a protected characteristic, and the 2010 Act separates the two. And this is to stop men basically entering safe spaces for women. We've done a story about this recently where a man went into a DV refuge. I can say hostage, but I mean, it wouldn't have been far off, would it? But a man goes into a DV refuge and pretends to be a woman for 10 weeks. And this is quite clearly wrong. And it endangers women and children. They want access to changing rooms. They want access to female toilets. They want access to female prisons. They want access to female wards in hospitals. They want access to anywhere where there's going to be women and children. And you have to ask why. Well, we know why. We absolutely know why. They have this paraphilia, and we all know that paraphilias extend always to children. And I've done video after video after video on where this is true. So we'll move in. We'll have a look at this article. And it's basically the court case is going to start today to give, finally, in Scotland, hopefully, an absolute definition of a woman. So here goes. So, as I say, it's from the Scottish Daily Express. Not one of my usual sources, but the very good person who highlighted this story to me gave me the link. Here we are. So, judicial review is heard today in a case brought against the SNP government over the legal definition of a woman. The campaigners for Women Scotland argue the Scottish Government's definition, which includes male transsexuals living as women and who have attained a gender recognition certificate, is unlawful. Which of course it is, because they're men with a piece of paper. They're not women. A legal challenge is being mounted against the Scottish Government to prevent sweeping changes to the legal definition of what it is to be a woman. And it comes as the SNP Green administration pushes ahead with plans to make it easier to change gender in Scotland with its Gender Recognition Act, which passed phase 1 last month. And it's currently being debated through Parliament. And this is a highly contentious bill. It's led to resignations by Ash Regan. Well done to her, standing up, having a spine, showing her moral stance, and everyone has saluted her for it. There's had lots of people have voted against it, or relatively lots of people. There was 6 people in the SNP alone voted against it, and 2 abstentions. So it's a bit of a, bit contentious even on their side. Plus, the Scottish Tories all voted against it, and they were the only ones, strangely enough. Labour, the Greens, everyone else in Scotland voted for it, because apparently all these others, or everyone on the left, they actually want women endangered in Scotland, I'm afraid. Anyway, the plans will allow trans people aged 16 and over to apply for a gender recognition certificate. Now, it must be pointed out that in law, 18 is the age of majority. Until you're 18, you are still technically, in law, a child. And so this act is saying that it's going to allow children, the legally defined children, the right to change their sex. They could, although they can never change their sex, but their gender. They could be at school. They could change from male to female, and they didn't have to tell their parents. But if they wanted to drop maths to study something else, they'd have to get parental permission. And it seems weird in Scotland, where you can't change a subject you're studying at school without parental consent. But you can have bits of your body hacked off and your pronouns changed, and it'll be a little secret, you know. This is because the SNP are groomers. Anyway, critics have warned the legislation will remove women's rights to a safe single-sex spaces, and are taking that challenge to court in Edinburgh for a second time. And they are quite right. As I said, we've done the story on men going into women's safe spaces, and they do present an absolute threat and danger, and that's happening now. What is it going to be like when they basically get a free pass to go in anywhere you like? There would be nothing stopping me, for example, wandering in to a crisis centre and sitting down and looking at the women. And I could be dressed as a man with a man's haircut, man's face, beard, and all I have to say is, no, I identify as a woman now. And that's it. There's nothing they can do. And if they called the police and said, there's a man here, I would just simply say, I find that offensive. I'm actually a lady. I identify as a woman. And that's hate speech. Can you arrest them? That's the madness of Scotland. The madness of the SNP. It's the absolute sheer hubris of what I can only describe as the most poisonous, toxic bill that's ever passed through any kind of parliament, anywhere. It is ridiculous. And it all comes from Sturgeon, of course, because her single-minded obsession with harming women and children. It's disgusting, really. Anyway, For Women Scotland previously won a judicial review of the appeal in 2022, February this year, which found the Scottish Government's definition of woman in the Gender Representation of Public Boards Act was unlawful. And what that meant was, as I said before, if you had to have a certain minimum amount of women on the board of a company, they could all those women could be men, and there's nothing you can do. So it's actually removing, not only removing women's rights, freedoms, and endangering them, it's also removing their opportunities. The Court of Session initially granted the appeal, stating that the SNP administration must adhere to the current definition described in the UK Equality Act 2010, because national law, as in UK-wide law, does take precedence over Scottish law, unless it is a devolved matter. Now, the Equality Act is not a devolved matter and is therefore sits atop any parliamentary laws created within the Scottish Parliament. So in Scottish Parliament, you can pass as many laws as you like on devolved matters, and they count, they are your law. But on a non-devolved matter, of which the Equality Act is one, doesn't matter what rules you pass in the Scottish Parliament, if it breaks the UK law, you're wrong and you're illegal. But instead, the FWS alleged that the Scottish Government failed to revise the guidelines correctly. In other words, the Scottish Government were told, you must pass this act, you must change these guidelines, and the Scottish Government didn't. So For Women Scotland are now saying that they haven't done so, and we're taking you back to court. Quite right. For Women Scotland said, in their revised guidance, the Scottish Government are still confusing, deliberately, the protected characteristics and are trying to redefine woman yet again, this time by incorporating the subgroup of male transsexuals living as women and who have attained a GRC, and by logical extension, excluding the corresponding group of females who do not live as women and have obtained a GRC. So what you're actually saying is, yes, women who are actually women and men who pretend to be women, but not women who pretend to be men. When in actual fact, women pretending to be men are women, and men pretending to be women are men, because it doesn't matter what goes on in their tiny little minds, they're still men. We wrote to the Scottish Government asking for the unlawful guidance to be removed. They declined to do so, stating that they consider the term woman includes those born male who have acquired a full gender recognition certificate, which is clearly wrong. And you don't want your children in a changing room with a, quote, woman who's still got the junk hanging out, especially when that, quote, woman is undressing in front of them and provocatively doing so and deliberately doing so. And we've already reported that this has happened. So there's no argument that, oh, this wouldn't happen, this never happens. Yes, it does. It's happening. It's happening again and again and again. For Women Scotland added, our solicitors advised there's no simple way to enforce the terms of the court order. Now the case with the Inner House is closed. And correspondence with the court confirmed that the only way to challenge the still unlawful guidance is to initiate a fresh judicial review. Now, I would suggest that the court looks at this and says, well, the court's already ruled on it and they're not doing it. Treat that as contempt of court, and that way you can get all the officials, all the politicians, and everyone who hasn't agreed to change this, you can have them up in front of the beak for contempt of court, and you can jail them. And I think you can get 5 years for contempt of court. So that would be quite nice, wouldn't it? We've given the matter a great deal of thought, as another judicial review is quite a considerable undertaking. Well, I hope if they need to start a fighting fund, I certainly will throw a bit of cash that way, and I hope a lot of you, my viewers, will possibly help them out. I'm not asking you to definitely do so, but if you feel you are able, it's something we can help them with. Anyway, however, we consider it imperative to protect the word woman in law, as all our legal rights and protections flow from its definition. And the analysis by the Inner House confirms that sex in the Equality Act is a biological term. And so we've decided we must challenge the Scottish Government's unlawful interpretation. The outcome of the case is expected following a 2-day hearing on Wednesday and Thursday, and will be summed up probably early next week. We will definitely be doing a follow-up on this story. It is appalling. It's appalling because of all the consequences of having an illegal definition of a woman. But I'll come up and finish. It's strange how it is always the left. It's always the socialists. The SNP is very socialist. The Greens are so far to the left that they're practically Marxist. The Scottish Lib Dems are voting for this as well, and they're obviously very left. Why is the left obsessed with the destruction of women, and why is the left obsessed with ensuring that children are exposed to grown men? They want these grown men to have access, and they want to give trans men, they're not. I know the definition of trans men and whatever, but they want to give these men with their delusional fantasies more rights than the rest of us, but an absolute right to access women's safe spaces and areas where young children will be, readily available to them. Let's put it this way. It's part of that normalisation of P. It absolutely is. There's no other explanation. You cannot give me any other reasonable explanation why this is constantly pushed and why women are constantly being excluded from all aspects of life. The left ultimately just dislike women. They want to cancel women. They want basically there to be men and other men. They don't want women to exist, and they certainly don't want to stop men having access to children either. That's the kind of sick people you're dealing with. And as I say, it is delusional, because just wanting something to happen doesn't make it so. I wish I was a lady. Well, you'll never be a lady. And it doesn't matter what chemicals you put in your body, what surgeries you go through. It doesn't matter. You'll be a man until they close the coffin lid. Right, well, we'll finish there. Thanks very much for listening. If you like what you're seeing here on the channel, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Ring the bell for notification of future output. Leave a like, leave a comment. Please share the video. And if you have a story, do get in touch. We're happy to, take all kinds of input, and we will, if the story's good, we'll certainly do a follow up. Thank you. But until next time, stay safe, stay well, always use the right toilets, and goodbye.